Greg, would you like me to bring it to order, or are we reading the,
I'll read that and then I'll hand it over to you. This is the Affordable Housing Trust meeting of December 19th. It's just after 5 o'clock. Consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. Public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. All motions and votes of the Affordable Housing Trust at this and future remote meetings will be by roll call vote. And you can call things to order.
all
Mr.
right,
Chair.
let's call the meeting to order at 5:04 PM on the 19th of December. Thank you all for your attendance. My name is Michael J. Lester. I am the Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. MJ?
Mary John Boylan, member of the trust. Joe,
Joe Bertolino, member of the trust. Ruth,
Ruth Pino, member of the trust.
tag someone.
Greg?
Deanna,
Deanna Fay, member of the trust. Chris,
Chris McCarthy, member of the trust.
I think that's it for members. Greg?
And Greg Cadamatore, Planning Director, and with us is Jen Goldson.
Terrific. We may as well get right into our strategic plan work session where we left off last time. I believe we were going through the discussion activity. It was a lot of great feedback. We ran out of time. We were putting values on our initiatives, and
That's right.
we tried to dole them out as quickly as possible, but it was a great deal of discussion, which was great. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen, and she can bring us back to where we left off.
great. Well, I have created a part 2 of our PowerPoint here, and then I'm going to get us back into that Miro board. I just wanted to mostly remind us what we had done and then where we left off. And let me just share that. Okay, you should be able to see my PowerPoint screen now. Okay, good. So this is part 2. And so we were ambitiously hoping to finish the whole thing in part 1, but we needed 2 sessions. I still think we can stay on track with the plan, but let me just go over that a little bit. So today I'm going to review just the first retreat and some of the discussions and takeaways. And then we're going to focus in on the activity that we were about to start when we ran out of time. And that is discussing the operating framework and your capacity to implement priority initiatives. And I'm going to give you a lead into that so you can just start to think about things and get your juices flowing a little bit before we go into the discussion. So the way I've revised the schedule is that rather than preparing the first draft of the plan for your meeting today, I'm just shifting it so that we can prepare that for your following meeting in January, which I noticed, I kept the date the same, but I did notice that date that we chose falls on Martin Luther King holiday, which I'm happy to do it. But I didn't know if that was just a mistake and folks didn't want to meet. So we can talk about that in a second, but let me just tell you what the next step is. So what we'll do is we'll prepare that first draft for your January meeting. And then we'll attend to any revisions. And so when we send that draft, if you could just take some time, we're going to send it in the first week of January. And so you'll have some time to look it over and think it through and do your homework and come prepared with any comments and thoughts. And then we'll hold that meeting in January and go through your comments. We'll attend to revisions, and then we'll send it back to you. The thing that's changed is that our January meeting was planned to be our last meeting in our scope. I think that we may not need another meeting after that, but I told Greg that if you felt like you did want to meet with me one more time, we could do that as an add-on if you still want to do that in February. I don't think you have to make that decision until you see the draft, have the discussion, see the revisions, and then you could decide if it's something you really want to meet with me again and talk about, we could do that. If not, then I think you're pretty much good to go. So let me just pause there. Does that feel comfortable to you, the way I adjusted the scope?
Yeah, I'm sure
Yes.
once we see the draft, Jen, we can get together as a group and decide if we'll need that extra meeting or, I mean, I would recommend, once we get the draft, we get together as a group on our, and go over it.
Yeah, so we'll go over together the first draft and then
Yeah.
I'll send you a revised one. And if you want to meet together as a group at that point and then decide if you want to bring me back in, or you could always just give me comments by email too. And I
Okay.
can put some final revisions on.
Anyone
Mike-
else have any comments?
I just have a question of Greg. Is it possible to gather in person to do the review, Greg? I just find it so much easier and more group participation rather than.
Yeah, I think we primarily stayed in this format because initially that's where things stood when we developed the scope with Jen. But it certainly could be possible to do that in January.
Ruth,
Yeah, and I didn't mean that Jen had to be there. I just meant.
Right. I'm saying for just the trust to meet, that could be accommodated. I think.
yeah,
Is
So
that,
the
is
meeting
that
in
the-
January, I am supposed to attend though.
Yeah, I think they were talking about a review meeting after they received the
Oh,
draft.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, I understand.
I thought
January
you meant that as well, Ruth, that the trust can, yeah,
January 16th is fine with me, and it's fine with me if it changes, so.
it's
Yeah,
fine with me as well.
we will need to adjust that. We can't hold city meetings when the city offices are closed, and they will
Oh,
be
that's
closed
true.
on
I
the
wasn't
Monday.
thinking of that.
Okay.
Even though we meet after hours?
If it's a public holiday, we typically don't hold public meetings.
Right,
All right, okay,
that makes sense.
no
All
problem
right,
with
so
that.
we'll have to work on a new date. I could do that offline with Greg, just so we don't take the meeting time for
Yep.
that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments about Jen's timeline here?
looks good to me.
Good.
Okay, great.
We'll nail down that meeting date, and we'll go from there.
Great, perfect. All right, so I think we touched on this last time, but what I really want to do is focus your discussion on these different approaches, just so you can deliberately choose, what you want to do in the next 5 years going forward. And so the way we've learned over the years that trusts organize themselves, and this happened organically, and we studied trusts to try to understand how they work back in like 2007, 2006, 2007. And we just observed from doing that there was basically 3 different approaches. Now, these are not codified or there's nothing formal about them, other than when I wrote the guidebook, I talked about them there. But these are just things that we observed from trying to understand how trusts operate. And so some trusts are initiators, and they really think of ideas, or they have land and they look for a development proposal for that land, or they create programs and they maybe find a nonprofit, or the city runs a program for them and they fund it. But basically they have ideas and they facilitate those directly. So we called them initiators. The second is a funder, where they have a formal application process and application itself. And they have criteria by which they would make decisions. And so that all applicants know how they should apply, what the time frame is for decisions, how will decisions be made, what kind of funding parameters are there. And so it's a formalized approach. And then there's a hybrid, which is a kind of a combination of doing a little bit of initiator, a little bit of funder, and we should talk about what you think you've been doing. That might be a good place to start, but let me give you a bunch of examples first. And then I just have a footnote here that just says some trusts also take on an advocacy role, which isn't kind of part of the foundational purpose of a trust, but it's found in many communities. And I know you spent some time talking about this already. It's found to be helpful because there's not another entity that's really doing it and so I just put that asterisk there, that some trusts also do an advocacy role, although that's not typically their primary role. Their primary role is to use their funds to create or preserve housing. Okay, so those are the frameworks, and I'm going to give you a bunch of examples just so you can see more concretely how that could play out. So Sudbury is an example of initiator. They, and this is a little screenshot of their Community Preservation Act application saying, we want $500,000 to purchase permanent affordable restrictions on single or multiple units in the town of Sudbury for homeownership or rental. So this is a specific program that they called, actually, I don't know what they called it. But they basically were looking to buy existing units, put a deed restriction on them, and then sell them. I think they might have called this the Home Preservation Program. But anyway, this is an idea of an initiative. And then they they actually ran this program themselves. They had a housing coordinator who ran this program for them. And they got that $500,000. And you can see that this is a project that they did a number of times. And so the application I think I pulled was the 2012, and they were just showing how they had already requested that funds back in 2009, and that this was basically a continuation of that program.
Jen, does this represent more than one unit, the $500,000?
Yes, I don't know how many units they bought for this in Sudbury. It's probably only maybe 4 or maybe less.
Whoa, they could buy that.
Yeah,
one?
well, they're
Wow.
like really buying, smaller, but still single family homes or condos. And this is a very expensive way to create deed restricted housing. It's probably the most expensive way that you can create deed restricted housing. So my guess is they might have created 3 or 4 units for this amount.
Well, they got a good price then, but it is a very slow and expensive way to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this was almost 10 years ago because I just pulled the application that I found online, and the
Yeah,
one that I found was from 2012. So this was like a decade ago. So obviously prices have changed too, but yeah, I think they bought a few units for that. All right. Next example, Eastham. I may have spoken with you about Eastham. I just pulled up their lease to own program. They have a few different initiatives. I think the one I talked to you about was that they were and correct me if I'm misremembering. I talked to a number of communities. I don't always remember who I said what to. But I think I told you about Eastham's program to buy homes, and then they'd create them as rental units that they would hold on to, and the trust still owns them. And then they contract out with a nonprofit to do the income verifications and management of those properties, et cetera. This is a different program, same town, but different program. They have a lease to own program, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do, where they're trying to provide assistance to income eligible renters. And the way they did this, if you're thinking, is that really eligible? Then you've done your reading or listened to me last time. So a lease to own program wouldn't be eligible in and of itself, unless perhaps you're using CPA funds under support, because you can provide direct assistance with CPA funds. But the trust by itself only can create or preserve housing. And a lease to own program would not create or preserve housing. It's really providing direct assistance to tenants in this case. However, let me just read this a little bit more carefully, because they're justifying, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're justifying under this definition right here, programs that provide grants, loans, rental assistance, security deposits, interest rates. That's the definition of support within the CPA. And that's why they could do this with the trust funds. Does that make sense? And I'm going into the details of why this is eligible, but really the point of this is to show that this is another kind of program a trust could run if you had CPA funds. And this would be an example of an initiator, something that you're doing. You had this idea that you want to implement it. You're not putting out an application, a funding round. You're just saying, we want to take some of our funds and create this program, or we want to ask for CPA funds and create a specific kind of program. So that's an example of a trust being an initiator. Make sense so far?
yes.
All right, here's another example of an initiator. So this is in Weston. And so Weston had this property And I don't think it says here, I don't recall how they acquired it. I don't recall if this was town-owned land. Maybe it says in this description. I'm
Well, it
scanning it.
says 3 municipal buildings, so they probably were owned by the town.
Yes, thank you for finding that. Yes, exactly. So they were town-owned land and the trust took control of this property. I'm assuming through an official transfer that the town transferred the property to the trust because of course the trust itself can hold property. And that's pretty common for towns or cities to transfer property to the trust for the purposes of creating affordable housing. And so in this case, they were reusing here, they created 7 affordable rental apartments by reusing 3 municipal buildings. And they worked out a deal with this, this Brook School Apartments is actually a town created entity. I can't remember the details in Weston, if they have a housing authority or if Brook School Apartments kind of serves like a housing authority. But the bottom line here is that the trust is not managing this project or these units. They basically contracted out or have some kind of agreement with an entity that already owns affordable units and has agreed to manage it. So you can do something like that with a housing authority, but in this case, it was Brook School Apartments, which is kind of unique situation to Weston, but the idea is still transferable. And the trust actually got a 40, they went through 40B. They got a comprehensive permit to do this because their zoning would not allow the creation of 7 affordable units. So this is something that the trust applied for the comprehensive permit. The trust owns the land. The trust contracted with Brook School Apartments. So you can see this is not something they sat back and said, you know, developers come and fill out our application and we'll consider. This is something they initiated themselves. Okay, so I had a few different examples of initiators. Some were programs, some were more bricks and mortar type projects. All right, this one is an example of a funder. So Yarmouth for many years would put out a public notice saying that they had funds available and they're looking for qualified developers to create new affordable units in Yarmouth. And they might have enough to award more than one in this particular round, and it could be for acquisition or construction, but this is not tied to a specific property or a specific idea. It's really just saying we have money, come and make a proposal. And in this one, they're saying how much they had. That back then, this was 2019, they had $250, 250,000 available. And then this is just the notice. So they have a request for proposal that a developer could obtain and then fill it out. And there was a deadline. They had to submit it, looks like by May 13th. So they gave them, you know, a month or so, a little over a month. And then they reviewed them. The trust actually reviewed any applications they got and they chose among the applications I'm assuming in a sequence of meetings. And then they voted to decide which ones they were going to fund. So this is an example of a formal application. This would be an example of a funder. This is another example of a funder. Stowe, they called it the Stowe Affordable Housing Trust Grant Program. And they have an application. They, you know, are saying that they will review the application and determine if it meets our requirements. They have a whole nother document that talks about what requirements, what kind of properties they're wanting to fund or projects they're wanting to fund. And then they tell you how to submit the application, et cetera. In this particular case, they want a nonprofit only, so that you don't have to limit it to a nonprofit, but Stowe decided that that's what they wanted to do. So if there are things like that you want to put in, that's something that you can talk about.
Do you know what the grants were for?
I don't know offhand. This one is City of Worcester. And you can find all of these online. But this one actually is quite thorough. And I just cut out a very small part, but they basically have a whole application packet. They have, you know, what their process is going to be. It's a formal process so that it's all very transparent and it's easy to find online. Anyone can go in to the City of Worcester website and Google, you know, Affordable Housing Trust application, and you come up with this and you see how you can apply. So All right, let me just go. Okay, so those are the examples. Do you have any? Let me go back to this. Do I have it again? No, let me go back to this slide about the framework. And what I just want to do is ask you, number one, if you have any questions about the examples or the 3 different types of approaches. And then I'm curious, how would you define the approach that you've been taking over the past, few years? And I know it was organic. I mean, I'm assuming it was relatively, organic. But how would you classify if you had to put a label on it?
Or funder.
Ruth says funder. Okay.
No, MJ.
No, and I did.
Both
do
of you did.
funder.
Oh, you
Yeah,
do
I
too?
saw
Okay.
Ruth first. I saw
Sorry.
Ruth's hands and then I heard MJ's.
Oh, I see the 2, right.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised, Jen, if any of our one-on-one interviews that you had over the last month, if anyone said otherwise, I mean, that's
Well, the thing
basically,
is, it's not easy to find an application for you and people
Yeah.
don't seem to know the process. So that's one thing I would ask you, is how transparent was it that you had money and that you were looking for projects, and how do people know what you're looking for?
I don't think we were hidden, if you don't mind me answering, Michael.
Yep.
I think it was clear when people were doing an affordable unit, they reached out to us. So either that happened through the community development department, but they knew about the Affordable Housing Trust and they knew we had money.
there just weren't many projects.
Right.
Right.
And I know you did have an application because Janie found it, but it wasn't online from what we could tell,
Or,
to apply for funding for you. It wasn't clear. If you go on the website of the city, it was not clear. People might have known, but it wasn't, I would say it was not transparent. There was nothing that, if someone was Googling Gloucester Affordable Housing Trust application, I don't think anything would come up.
okay, without looking at it myself, so there's no application form that someone could link to from the website. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding. Greg, you can correct me if I'm not remembering this right.
Yeah, I think that's correct. There wasn't one. Jamie had been working with the CPA committee. And when she started to work with the trust in probably around 2019, I think it was. I think that's one of the first things she said, well, maybe it will make sense to have a form. So there is a fairly simplified form, and I think it's probably been used maybe once or twice. But it wasn't something that was posted to the website.
Okay, so let me go into the exercise now. And I'm gonna just get out of this PowerPoint and then I'll reshare my screen in a second. I just have to change what we're looking at. Okay. All right. So this is I'm gonna make this bigger in a second, but just to remind you of what we had done. So the first meeting we had, or the working session we had, now I forget when that was. We first talked about, it's a little bigger. Okay, is that big enough for you guys?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, so first we just had you imagine, and we did these newspaper things. And you can see when we asked you what your headline would be, these were your answers. So you're talking about units here, results in 60 units over the next 5 years. This one is helps you approach your minimum affordable housing requirements, increase your housing by 500%. Want a goal of a specific number of units for middle income families. Trust surpasses 5-year goals by creating units, quadruple your affordable housing. And this one is about advocacy and funding, supporting the development of 200. So these are all about production, right? They're all about creating units, looking at both advocacy, creating units through advocacy, perhaps through zoning that was implemented, and also creating units through funding that you had. Then we went over here and we asked you what specific actions could help you achieve your goal. And there's nothing here because what we did was we took all your ideas and then we started to sort it into this little matrix here. And the matrix basically asked you to discuss pros and cons and identify priorities. And we have 4 categories that we started to change a little bit what they were. So we have this one is do it in years 2 through 5. So not immediately, not in year 1, but down the road, we want to do these things. And then in year 1, we have a lot on our plate. We want to do all these things and we'll look at those in a minute. And then the ones we had down here, we sorted into a do it if there's time, but these are not the highest priorities. And then here we have a don't do it, just one. The rental assistance was put in the don't do it category. So let's go right into the immediate ones. And this is just a refresher, memory refresher right now. So what we have for do it now in year 1 is get your updates for the website, including links to resources, an application, your trust process, and start to, blow your own horn, success stories. We've got discussing if and how to engage in the zoning discussions for MBTA communities. Talking about zoning amendments to encourage more affordable housing, just in general, an advocacy. And we kind of grouped these together. Being involved in city planning efforts. And I think in particular, the comprehensive plan, although I didn't specifically say that here, but I think that's what we were talking about, and maybe other planning efforts too, but being involved in planning efforts that are happening, especially around a vision for more housing. And then this is really promoting or incentivizing the recently adopted changes through zoning, including ADU. Even maybe through funding assistance. So looking at how can we incentivize people using those new tools. And then down here, we have doing really proactive outreach to developers, looking at city-owned land and supporting the development, perhaps just as facilitators, perhaps not with funding. Revamping your application and application process. I'm actually going to move that next to the website here. And then we also talked about advocating for projects such as Habitat for Humanity, when going out to zoning board meetings. I'm going to, sorry, I have to sneeze. It's not coming. Okay. Going to community meetings or planning board or zoning board meetings, planning board meetings, et cetera, and being advocates for projects that you're funding, projects that you voted on already to support. And then solidifying your relationship with the CPC. So a lot of this is foundational. A lot of this is about communication. A lot of it's about advocacy. And then getting organized around having an application and a funding round and that kind of thing. And then, I skipped over this. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Engaging with the city. We heard a couple different things about short-term rentals. We heard advocacy for reasonable restrictions, and we also heard about, well, let's, engage with the city in studying the impacts, and they were really, related to each other. So I won't go through every single sticky note, but I mostly just wanted to remind you of what the year 1 was and just kind of our overall framework that we looked at before. Before I go into the next exercise, which I'll show you, and then we can flip back over to that other view if you want. It's really talking about the pros and cons, and then ultimately I'd like to end the discussion with a preference of, the pros and cons of doing initiator style, funder style, hybrid, something in between. And then I also want to talk about advocacy, not so much as a choice between them, but just as in addition, I know that you want to do advocacy, so I want to make sure that you're kind of clear on how you want to go about that, and sort of what proportion of your time and energy you want the advocacy piece to take versus, using your funds to create units through development or through preservation, and when I say development, I don't necessarily mean new development. You could be reusing existing buildings, but the idea is to create units that were not there before. And so that's what I want to spend the time on tonight. But before I do that, I thought I'd just give you a chance to, if you have any thoughts about the work that you did last time, and I think all of you were here. And I think, is Chris here too? I can't see everyone on the screen. Yeah. Okay, good. Chris is here. Good. Yeah, I think all of you were here, and then Joe's here. I know he had some juggling with kids, so he's kind of listening in right now. Does anybody have any either reflections or thoughts or anything that they want to mention? Ruth? Oh, Ruth, you're on mute.
It dawned on me, listening to you talk, that the advocacy, I think, should include education to the public, what affordable means. Because what people don't understand, the people who are opposed to zoning changes specifically, for example, is they don't understand that they may have paid $50,000 for their house or $300,000 for their house or whatever that number was. It doesn't compare to what's happening today. And that the people who are impacted by the higher values are school teachers and policemen and firemen and public employees, bank tellers, everyone who works for us in the public.
Right.
And we have enough, it's not, we'd be very specific on how we would do such a thing. And I'm not really sure how to get that done, but I was thinking about it a lot, listening to you talk, and I think that's part of educating the public on what the trust is doing, housing needs, and what affordable means, and it's already there.
Great. Well, I added on what affordable means based on what
Okay.
you just said. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And we had, based on the discussion last time, we put that in the do it when and if there's time category, but it's not as high a priority as these other things.
Yep.
Any other thoughts or comments about this before we move on?
I would just add, sort of piggybacking on what Ruth said, as we work on, a more transparent, detailed application process and information for a website, I mean, that's also an opportunity for being able to get that messaging out about, why affordability matters in Gloucester, what it means, what are things that we can do and cannot do. That sort of thing. So I think, as we work on that process, it becomes a resource for locals to go to and get some pretty quick answers as well.
Yeah, and the answer specifically would be what people don't understand, the 80%, 60%, 30%. What does that really mean income base wise?
Right.
Okay.
Great. They have a really good point, because a lot of what we do is going to be stymied if the public doesn't understand, the words.
Yes.
Right. And using the things you're doing up here to really weave that education in. Yeah, that's smart. I like that. All right. Anybody have anything else, or should I move on?
Well,
Alright.
you use the word reflection, and I will say this, I worry about managing staff wise, because you just went by something. Just go back to that other screen and just enlarge it. So how it says obtain, no, next.
Over here. Yeah.
Obtain, accept land for development. We don't need to have a long conversation about it, but it's still, those things we'd have to really talk out. How do we manage owning something? And the other thing I don't want to forget to say tonight, because I do have that hard stop, is I have a question for you, which is if you ever worked with ground leases, because there are a number of them in Gloucester that create an entire property of affordable units. And there's the ground lease management of that. So that's there's some management going on. So the reason I brought that up is because one of the examples you gave was an apartment complex took on the management of it. So I like that.
Right. Yeah. They basically designated this other entity to do the management part. Yeah. All right, good. So
Did-
let's go into this. Oh, did I?
Jen,
hear Yeah.
Jen, it's Chris. The only thing I would say is part of, if you could go back to the other screen, a couple points, I would say as we go through this process and put together this plan that we're creating with you, is that I think that's got to be a part of our advocacy, I think, in really letting people sort of know, you know, I think that's going to be something that's going to, which we probably haven't had, something for people to look at, both people that that are looking to build affordable, people that are looking to, you know, they're looking to purchase, looking to, you know, I think that as part of this, what would you call it? What would be the name of this plan that we're writing? And
Strategic plan.
yeah, I think really part of that I think it should be strongly put forward about that we're really more of an advocate. I'm having trouble saying it. You know, that's what we're here to do, is to help and to push and to create more affordable housing long term. I think that's part of the plan that should be really upfront. That's what we're here to try to help to do. You know, that that's what I would,
great
that's what
guidance.
I would want to see, probably as a developer looking to be able to say, okay, this is something they're really taking this on. They want to help. They want to help both, you know, financially. You know, they want to help us with, you know, other you know, other avenues that we can, you know, follow. You know, I think that's important. I think what Ruth had mentioned, I think that the ownership part in the next screen to the left, to the right, I don't think that, I wouldn't be so concerned about owning property if it's a question of someone was going to donate land. I think that it's, as long as we have in place, you know, what our strategy is to take it and to be able to, you know, send out RFPs as to develop it. And if, you know, if we're able to own something and attract and own something and be able to put it back out on the market, I don't think that ownership is that big of a deal for a short period of time. If that can help us get some affordable units out there. So I don't see it as being a big hurdle. It's just how you're able to do it and what mechanism of ownership and you know, protect liability wise while we have something and put it out for an RFP. But I don't think it's a real a huge concern. I just
And
think it's
then
just
sell
something.
it rather than doing a ground lease, so you don't even have to.
Yeah, I
to-
think it's just following the detail, you know, just following the development process, purchasing process, developing or putting together, you know, if it's raw land, you know, you just put out an RFP, and then part of that is that they take ownership and do it. It's got to be restricted. But I think it's something we definitely should include there, because there are people that want to donate land that are out there that want to, you know, and I think we've got to keep that door open to be able to take things in and then be able to spit them out for development, for affordable projects.
Great.
That's all.
thank you.
Hey, hey guys, this is Joe. Kind of piggybacking off of what everyone said, and I'm sorry if this has already been said, as in some stuff may have been lost while I was getting in my car, but I think it's very important to kind of play a hybrid role, and hybrid between the people who are looking to purchase and develop these affordable units, which is great, and that's going to create affordable housing long term. But I don't see any reason why we can't help with the immediate problem of renters who have no realistic point of view of purchasing anytime soon, but they still need help affording the increasing rents in the city, where we certainly could lend a hand in doing so. I know that we have the housing authority, and I know there's project-based subsidy, and I know there's mobile vouchers, and I know all about all that good stuff, but there's plenty of people who live in that 80% to 100% AMI that can't afford to, you know, that they struggle paycheck to paycheck.
So
And
Joe, I'm glad you chimed in, because when we discussed last time, we had rental assistance program on the list of ideas, and the group really ended up feeling like this was not a high priority and that we We would rather not do that in the next 5 years. So it would be good for you to kind of chime in. The group, I think for the most part, is all here. And I know you weren't able to come last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it really speaks to, in my opinion, my humble opinion, what's the heart of what we are about. If we're about advocating for zoning changes and helping developers, so be it, but it's a ripple, and it's not gonna, it won't do much in the short term. And it may add some decent units in the long term, but with the work that Deanna and Heather put together, that we just got this giant splash of money, for $100,000 a year, which is, just probably a little bit more what interest would earn on that account like that. You could help 16 families a month with $500 a month, afford a 3-4 bedroom here. And if that's not what this trust is about, that's okay. I personally think that's what it should be about, or certainly should include. Because
I think the thought process, Joe, was that there would have to be a dedicated staff to administering a rental assistance program. And I think, I know Deanna was a strong proponent of this, and most of us weren't completely in favor because of the administration that goes along with a rental assistance program. And the consensus was that we should let the people that do it well, stick to it. But
no, and Mike, I think that's all good and great, but unfortunately, they have their own parameters in which they have to operate, and they only get X amount of money, just like we do. And when no one's knocking down our door to build units, and if they are knocking down our doors to build one, that's, to me, that's not helping. And I'm sure we could, I haven't looked into this, but between me and Google, I'm sure that we could find someone or a nonprofit to help us administer such a project.
So let me just say, if it's okay, Mike, everyone here is concerned about the same things you are, Joe. It wasn't anything to do with not wanting to help. I'm only speaking for myself now when I say that I would rather use the same money to subsidize rentals, so that encourages people. And if we get ARPA money dedicated to our needs, we'll get applications. There's no doubt in my mind. It's a circle of things that have to happen. One is support of projects, however that takes place, and zoning amendments that allows developers to build or create units in already existing housing, and have an affordable component to it. So if we're getting that money, there will be applications. So the rental assistance that you're talking about would be direct assistance, but it goes to the tenant as opposed to actually having units become permanently subsidized or affordable.
No, I definitely understand the permanency of what we do is probably far more preferable than the short-term aspect. In my opinion, again, this is my, again, my opinion. I think we can do both. And I think it would be, if we just choose the advocacy group or the advocacy lane, that's all good and great. I think we should really push it and not just wait for someone who can purchase or build 10 units and be like, hey, you want to throw one to us and we can give you X amount of money, or we can do this. It's just what's going to be, and I guess this is why we're doing this, right? To figure out what's going to be the best use. And like I said 2 seconds ago, I think we can do both, but I'm going to defer to everyone else's call.
Well, what do others speak, think? Just because we did put it in this category, I want to make sure that we have a thorough discussion on this before we move on to the model of trust that you want to be. MJ, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm a little lost in the weeds. Can we distill this down to like a few words?
Yeah, I think what's happening is Joe is feeling like the rental assistance program idea, a local rental assistance program should be elevated to something that you consider doing. Right now, it's in the don't do it category. And Mike had raised some, concerns about administrative responsibilities. Joe had thought, you could probably just hire a nonprofit to manage the administration aspects of the program. And then Ruth was talking about, creating units themselves will be permanently affordable and create a benefit to renters rather than direct assistance, which is really short-term help and doesn't create a permanently affordable unit. And anybody, I'm paraphrasing, so if I
Yeah, no,
if I didn't-
that sounds like what I heard. I just wasn't
Okay.
sure they were all
Yeah.
tied together. I'm in Ruth's camp about trying to get rental units that are permanently affordable as opposed to subsidizing rentals, just because I don't know. I think it's a smarter. I think it's a smarter way to go. It's a better use of our money. It's more in the housing world, it's almost impossible to keep up with all the regulatory demands there are, and their housing authorities, very close to where we're all sitting right now. They're struggling trying to get, Gloucester Housing is
Yeah.
now fully staffed for the first time in 18 months.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
What I think is we're trying to, I think with the trust is make some really kind of structural changes in how we're dealing with affordable housing. And I think that our time is probably spent best in making some of the structural changes now and in the next couple of years so that we can make a lot more permanently affordable places. And I think that concentrating our energy there is definitely best. If we can through our I guess through our mission be able to send some rentals. Are we able to do that? Does that
So
fall?
I have to look at the requirements of the ARPA funds. With CPA funds, you absolutely could do that. And I don't know if Greg knows off the top of his head, if you can, you
I
might
think
be able to.
I think it might be important that we do.
Can I
If we-
just interject? I'm sorry, can I just interject?
Sure.
When I had suggested it at our last meeting, my thoughts were that it would be a way for us to utilize CPA funds as sort of an ongoing, annual application process. Maybe we could create some kind of grant program,
Yeah.
Particularly for people that are in transition housing, so that they're they're burdened by the first, last social security deposit. That's a significant amount of money to have to move from unit to unit. So that we could maybe create sort of an ongoing grant program, and that way I don't know how people feel about maybe just sort of putting that as not a don't do it, but on the back burner.
I think you're right. I think we should
maybe we could
keep
revisit.
it without a lot of effort. If we can be able to contribute, I think in the rental assistance program, if we're able to contribute funds without spending a lot of energy doing that and still understand, how the process is going, I think it's something that we should, if we're able to do it under our mission, to be able to do it but again, being able to funnel monies to the people that are experts in that field. And if it means, I just wouldn't spend a lot of time. I think we've got a lot on our plate for the next year or so to try to really make as big a bang as we can with the trust to move forward in a few different directions. And I think not excluding the rental assistance program, I think is important, but just not spending a tremendous amount of energy doing
Well,
it.
Joe, where do we divide our time and energy? This was like put last on the list, and we're talking about basically something that's like poverty relief versus affordable housing. Action and other agencies do these things.
Wellspring also.
We're in a special position here to, you know, to hopefully create and sustain affordable housing. We're not an anti-poverty agency as such, like Action. That's where, you know, that's where I have a problem with it. We only have so much money. We only have so much steam. We only have so much, you know, talent and time. So do we want to just, because this would be a hugely, I mean, the economies of scale are such that I think you really need to be able to have at least enough money to sustain 300 or 400 vouchers to get one person on salary to administer this, to make it even start to make sense. And that would be all our money, you know, and it would be going toward, you know, in basically in an anti-poverty program as opposed to an affordable housing program. I might be missing something, but that's the way
No,
I see it.
I think
Well,
you said
I-
it perfectly, because there's also Wellspring. And the thing
Yeah.
about an
But at
action
the
is
Right, and that's all good and well, guys.
to provide other
and
services.
Okay.
I
At
Hold on.
fully understand.
At the same
At-
time, I think that affordable housing is anti-poverty. So I think they do connect them a little bit. And I think
Oh,
we've
well,
got
of
to
course, yeah.
Of course it is, because it's not an anti-poverty, it's creating affordable housing
Yeah.
for families in need. And there are.
No,
tons of
it's not
communities-
creating housing. It's
Oh,
it's
of course
it's
it is. It's taking housing that. And now,
We're losing you,
yeah, we're losing you.
Joe.
I was just suggesting that to make a bigger splash, this is the way to do it. If creating affordable housing through deed restrictions and development is a great idea and a super use of our funds, that I'm not disagreeing with. I just say that despite how difficult a problem could be, we shouldn't shy away from it. But if everyone disagrees, then absolutely I'm gonna fall in line, and I fully appreciate the feedback, and I definitely understand the use of money is better directed towards that. I get that.
You know, I think where we're ending up here is to don't take it off the table.
Yeah, correct.
Put it in do it if and when there's time table, but
Yes.
it's not your highest priority. You know, you have a
Well,
lot
wait
of
a
other
minute, we
things to
haven't,
focus
we
on.
don't have a consensus on this, Jen. I mean, we've had two members speak in favor of keeping it on the table, and two have spoken against, and some who haven't spoken. Why does it go back on I mean, anything can go on how are we gonna move forward if we can't make decisions?
Well,
We
I
haven't
think
made
you-
one.
I
We
think
made
what I'm
one
hearing
last
is that you don't have enough information to take it off the table, or to put it in one of these, do it in year 1 or year 2 to 5. So right now, I put it in this category of if there's time. It's a lower priority. It's something that you can consider at some point in the future, but it's not going to make the next 1 to 5 years in your strategic plan.
All right.
That's a very
mean-
vague bucket it's in right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but note
it's like-
my objection anyway. I'm not ever, you know, I just feel this is what other groups do and not why I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust. I would, you know, be on the Board of Action instead, or Wellspring.
Me too.
Thank you. So suggestions are noted.
Okay, so for Deanna and Joe, who seem to be more proponents of putting it in the do it if you have time at some point in the future, but it's not a high priority bucket.
I'm
I
in
mean,
that group.
as
I'm in that
guy,
group,
you
too.
guys we could take it out altogether. If it being in some bucket or somewhere makes ruffles feathers or gets people upset, or is it just too much, then take it out. I agree. We don't, you know, we all
No, I don't-
operate on finite resources.
No,
And I don't
nobody's
wanna-
upset. It's
I
just a
don't
difference
wanna-
of opinion. Yeah, it's a difference of opinion, Joe. It's
Oh, no,
not
no,
about being upset.
MJ, no,
Yeah.
oh, no, I understand that. I'm not
Yeah.
saying anyone's upset.
Jenna,
But if it takes away time from providing anyone with the sources, take it off. I think it's more important that we all, because I'm on board with what you guys are saying. So let's go gung ho with that. I'm all about that.
Jen, I wouldn't put it in the don't do it. I would leave it in the, when we have time to discuss it and further dig into it. I would never, I don't think I'd leave it in the don't do it. I would put it in when we have time, when we can discuss it further on, but I would definitely, it's something that we should consider, I think.
All right, guys, I think we just have to vote on this one because we're not
Okay.
going to reach consensus in the time we have in this meeting. So why don't you raise your hand, and Joe, you can just use your voice since you're on the phone. If you want to leave it in the, right now, I put it back into the don't do it bucket. Raise your hand if you want to keep rental assistance in the don't do it bucket.
I say don't do it.
Okay, so that's Joe, MJ, Mike, and Ruth. So I have 4 in the don't do it. And go ahead and raise your hand if you want to keep it in the do it if you have time bucket. I have Chris and Deanna. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead then, based on that vote, and keep it in the don't do it bucket. All right, so let's move on here. So Joe started his comments with talking about, wanting to do both things. So I put that in a pro, that as a hybrid, you can create programs and also fund developers. So you have a little more flexibility to do different kinds of things. What do other folks think? You've been doing the funder role now. Is that something you want to continue with and really formalize that, as I'm suggesting, with a application process and a transparency on your website? Do you think you do want to do programs or acquire land and put out an RFP? That would be more the initiator bucket. And right now we're just talking about pros and cons. So who has an opinion on one of these approaches?
Well, I think we need to continue to be a funder.
Yes,
But I think we need to, if we had, like, if Jamie had trouble finding our application, that's an issue. I think we need to bring that more to the forefront and how to find our application and what we do.
I just want to
Hi, everyone.
clarify, Jamie knew where it was. It was just not something, I think it was probably created when you had very little funding left. And I think the Y used it, for the last disbursement. And then you were kind of in the holding pattern of getting refunded. But I agree, if it's something that you're going to move forward with, we want to make it as predictable as possible for people to understand what they might be eligible for, what the timeline is, what the process would be. So that's certainly something that I think would be important.
All right. Does
Hi,
anyone else
everyone.
have a feeling about kind of the pros and cons of continuing as a funder?
I'm sorry to interrupt, guys. I hate to do this. I'm somewhat lost right now in Hamilton Wenham, so I feel like a fool. I have to jump off. Hopefully I can call back in. But if I don't, I just want to wish everyone happy holidays, and I hope everyone has a great season. But I hope to call right back in.
Okay.
I hope you
thanks,
can
Joe.
call back too, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like an idiot.
No worries.
I don't know where I am. So if you guys read about it tomorrow, it was me. So you guys have a great night. Hopefully I'll jump back on soon.
I gotcha.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right. So why don't you just do a round robin here? I'm going to call folks as I see them. If you feel like, this might be a short discussion. If everyone's like, let's do funder, we're not going to do programs, or other, local initiatives like that. Ruth, what do you think?
I prefer to be a funder
Mhm.
because there are communities of professionals who are initiators already. It's not about not competing with them, but they know what they're doing. And they have the tools and the professionals to get it done. And I think our method of reviewing the applications has been a good one.
All right, great, thanks. Deanna, what are your thoughts on the approaches?
My preference is to be a hybrid model. And I say that because the Affordable Housing Trust historically has been exclusively a funder. And I don't think that that's the path that we need to follow any further, and that we need to really be better invested in the community. And we need to better integrate with other committees and programs that are working towards housing, and sort of be, another cog in the wheel. So we all need to be sort of advocating together. We all need to be promoting things together, and not just be in a silo like I feel like historically maybe the trust has been.
And would you say that I mean, by nature, it's really a more passive role and you're looking for a more active role?
Exactly. Yeah. I want it to be, a proactive, integral part of the community with regard to affordable housing.
And so when you envision being more of an initiator, what kinds of things would you want to initiate other than advocacy, which I'm thinking of as a separate approach that you can also do under any of these, but what kinds of, how would you want to use your funds to be an initiator?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about ARPA funds, I mean, so you're talking about other than advocacy. So,
Yeah.
maybe creating some sort of RFP programs, to some outreach to developers to get them interested, to have them come and invest into the community, to create, affordable housing development within the community. I think that we don't want to wait for them to approach us with a project idea. We want to go to developers, whether that's Harbor Light, whether that's North Shore CDC or Habitat, to
Yep, I
say,
see what
what could you do in our city if we can fund you?
So rather than just like putting an application up online and then waiting for someone to fill it out, really going out and you would still be a funder in that regard,
Right.
but you would be really trying to actively promote and make those connections. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Let's see. MJ, how about you?
Well, I actually don't see Ruth and Deanna being all that far apart. The funder role combined with effective advocacy is exactly, what is basically Deanna's, definition of initiator, kind of. It's one might say initiating, one might say advocacy, but we're talking about pretty much same thing. I think that on the trust, we have an opportunity to excite some interest in a community of developers to invest in affordable housing here in Gloucester. And that's to say we bring them in. We're not, doing the projects ourselves or, sending out our hiring architects and doing things like that. We're still basically a funder, but what we're trying to do is smooth the path a bit by telling people, you're welcome here. This is, the advocacy role.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. They're not that far apart. And
Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with that for sure.
one thing I'm not hearing is starting a program, even if you fund it by some other entity. I'm not hearing acquiring land and then putting an RFP out for that particular piece of land. Those I would consider as initiator projects.
That's, if you were to call on me, I would say initiator. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd say,
let's hear it, Chris.
well, I mean, does hybrid include both funding and initiator?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
meant by it. Not,
Yeah,
I mean,
so, yeah.
advocacy I view as separate completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think initiator, I think we've got to be able to find, whether it's through city-owned land, getting donated land, working, I think going out and, I don't know, I think having to find land and be able to then look for RFPs. I think that's what we really need to the hybrid model. I think we've got to be able to, you know, find projects, find pieces of land that we can put out to and I think whether it's strictly nonprofit developers, I think being able to find lots city owned and really just make sure we put them out to nonprofits for smaller projects, I think.
Yeah, if you wanted to do that and a whole application process where you're just saying, look, we have money, we're also going to be using land that we have
Yep.
transferred to us or donated to us, and we're going to.
Or even getting at a discount or something. I think there's I think we've got to really, I think Deanna hit it, hit it. Not just the funder, we've got to go out there and we got to be creative and being able to get the different projects that we can bring into the affordability realm. We got to do some searching and some digging, and I think that's we really need to do, and get some of these lots that are vacant and they're scattered around the city, that we can bring them in and I think get them out to nonprofit developers to just do every project afford 2 units or 3 units. I think that's what we should be doing.
So to
Okay,
me,
Ruth?
Jen, this whole
Hold on,
process.
Ruth has had her hand up. Mike, let me call on
So
her first. if
sorry,
you don't
guys,
mind.
but I really have to go. This is such a great conversation. I hope this doesn't cause a problem with majority and all that, but I just have to go. I'm so sorry. And if we could get a reminder to the schedule, Greg, that would be very helpful so that all of us will be there next time. For the duration, for as long as it takes.
Mhm.
But thank you so much, Jennifer.
Happy holidays, Ruth.
Thanks,
Happy
Ruth.
holidays. So do you still have a quorum or?
Still
or
have a
did-
quorum.
You do,
Yep.
you do have a quorum? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
So just the one thing I was gonna say, Jen, is I'd be surprised if there was anyone on the call that didn't think we should lean towards being more of a hybrid trust. I think we were all leaning in that direction when we went over the exercise from the beginning, just by some of those
Yeah.
Post-it notes we
Yeah.
came up with.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk for everybody or speak for everybody, but I think just by moving those Post-it notes around, I think most of us are in agreement that we want to become more of a hybrid trust.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing as well. Does anybody object to the idea of acquiring land, could be through donation, as Chris said, or city, and seeking a development for that land, and then you transfer the ownership? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would
And-
definitely be a hybrid then, if you're doing both an application and doing initiatives like that.
The only thing I would add to Chris is that it would need to be discussed, like Ruth said, because of the administrative part of owning land and just working through that, the mechanics of that. So we
Yeah, and I mean,
definitely, it's worth a discussion.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and it might be that if we're a city-owned body, it becomes city-owned. That's all.
Yep.
It's city-owned. So I don't think there's a lot of, we just have to go through the legal process. But if we're a city body and it would obviously be city-owned, the city would have to take ownership in some manner and then put it out there.
yeah, it would be, I mean, the trust can actually own property, so it would be under the trust name. And you could go through, as Ruth said, a ground lease type of arrangement, but you could also just sell it outright and you don't need to hold on to the property. So we can get into some of those models as I write this up for you. Okay, so we'll go with that. And then I think I understand the advocacy role. We probably don't have to talk about that further because we have all these Post-it notes over here with lots of different advocacy ideas. So I actually think I have enough to write a first draft for you in early January now, Chris.
Quick question. What has been your thoughts on putting something forward, smaller projects through strictly nonprofits versus private developers, or nonprofit developers versus, gearing an RFP towards strictly that? What are your thoughts on
That certainly works in many regions. A lot of it depends on if you have likely candidates that would be, that would be interested and able to do that kind of project.
Okay,
But I think that most of the communities that are trying to do that do find, Habitat for Humanity or other non-mission-based nonprofits who are doing
Okay.
affordable housing like that. Yeah.
is that something we can get a list of from you at some point, a regional list potentially?
I don't have a regional list of developers.
Okay, the
For you
nonprofits, okay.
guys, but
Okay.
one of my recommendations is going to be capacity, and I know it was mentioned a few times in our interviews and in these meetings that as you get busier and busier and start to do some local initiatives even and have a more formal funding round, there's some more administrative and technical assistance help I think that you would benefit from. And so if you can get a housing coordinator or a trust staff person, they could do that kind of research for you, create a
Okay,
list of all
gotcha.
the regional nonprofit developers
Gotcha.
and start to nurture relationships. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me stop the share here because we're really finished with this activity. So, I mean, I know we have a little time. I'm happy to try to choose a date now, Greg, while we have everyone for that January meeting to replace the one that was on MLK Day. Does that make sense to do it?
Yeah,
Since
we
it's-
could try to do that. Maybe if we could, if the four of you could agree to 2 dates, just because we don't have three of the 7.
Sure.
So hopefully between a couple of dates that we might be able to find a time that's convenient for everyone.
Well, that same week, I'm open the Tuesday and Wednesday, 17th and 18th. If
I
if
am
either
as
of those
well.
dates work.
Both of those work for me.
I can do Tuesday.
Either works for me.
I'll be in Florida, but I can get on Zoom.
Sorry,
No,
was
either
that
day.
MJ? Did you say you can or can't do Tuesday?
I can do Tuesday. I cannot do Wednesday.
Cannot do Wednesday. Okay, and then if we want a second date, the next week is out for me. The next open date I have is Monday, the 30th of January.
What do
That
people think
works.
about that?
That works for me.
It works for me as well, the Monday.
Does
Sorry.
that push,
Okay.
does that push things out too far though for your schedule, Jen?
It's okay for me, it's okay. It's
All right,
okay.
why don't we
I don't mind.
hold those 2 dates, the 17th and the 30th at 5 o'clock? And as I think as Mary John had asked earlier, or Ruth or both, after that date, we could also have the trust meet in person just to review that draft. But that would be the first one to go over it with Jen, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna get it to you in early January. And
Okay.
then you'll have a few weeks either way, whichever date you pick. You'll have
Okay,
a
well,
few
we'll
weeks.
circulate with the balance of the trust and we'll pick one of those 2 dates.
Perfect.
So Greg, were you thinking that once she sends us the first draft on or around January 6th, then we would get together in person to review?
No, you would meet with, I think, go through it with Jen, and then if you had,
Okay,
the desire to kind of discuss it further after that point, you could meet in person.
okay.
I think that makes sense, right, Jen, for you to kind of walk through it
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, good. Well, that was everything I had. I don't know if you have other items you need to cover.
I don't know, but we can probably excuse Jen. I apologize for letting things get people talking over one another. When we don't have gallery view, when your agenda's up, I can
Yeah.
only see me and one other person. So I can't see who's raising their hand or who would like to ask a question. So my apologies, Jen.
All right, good. Well, thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.
All
You
right,
too,
holidays.
Jen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
we'll
Thanks,
look
Jen.
forward to seeing that on the 6th.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, all right, I don't think there's much left on the agenda.
That was the bulk of the agenda. So I think, and that last point was just kind of making sure that we were still on schedule. I think she feels pretty comfortable where she is based on the input from tonight as well.
Yeah.
And then just sliding that next meeting a little bit.
No, I thought it's good discussion. It's good to hear from people. It's spirited, but at the same time, everyone has their opinions and it's healthy, I think, in the long run for us. It shows we're growing and we're willing to evolve as a group as well. So I want to thank everybody. Anyone else have anything for the trust?
Yeah, I just have a
Deanna?
quick question for Greg, I guess. If you have anything at all that you can update with us regarding either city-owned land potential still. I know that you were looking at something. I think I read somewhere that there was a inclusionary zoning, a good size inclusionary zoning development coming up, which would have some potential for affordable units. I haven't been able to find out if it's a rental or a for purchase development, or anything else regarding the 40B project on Maplewood, like any ongoing projects you might be able to update us on.
Sure. Just quickly, the 40B project at 50R Maplewood is still with the Zoning Board of Appeals. There's been quite a bit of paper coming back in from some peer review aspects. The city solicitor also hired outside counsel to kind of manage the project, and they've provided some feedback as well. I'm not sure if that's on the agenda for this week or not, whether they continued out. There's quite a bit of a response that the applicant will have to address, but that's kind of where it sits entirely within the Zoning Board of Appeals at this point. Any board or commission that was solicited for comment has provided it. So the board has quite a bit in front of them at this point. In terms of projects that are kind of in the pipeline, there's 2 projects in front of the planning board right now. One open space residential development at 19 Cole Ave, which proposes 6 lots with duplexes as the construction, and that would be required to provide 2 affordable units. There's also a cluster development at 171 Magnolia Ave. That is a 26-unit proposed project, also in duplex style, that would have to provide 4 units of affordability. And Ruth alluded to, there hasn't been a formal application to the city council yet. There's only been some relief request for a multi-story building at 20 Main Street. So it's currently in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals for some relief. And that project is a proposed 28-unit project that would require 5 affordable units. I haven't seen the detail of whether it's rental or ownership.
Is
Is that the building that's like, is it offices now, the one next to Dono?
It's actually what used to be a bank building. It was also the Fisherman's Outfitter.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of a
Okay.
small building next to Jordan Main.
But Cole and Magnolia, those are resale?
They will likely be ownership. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I had to leave the room for a second. Is there an update on the project on the other end of the east end of Main Street? The housing?
Yeah, so there hasn't been a formal application. My understanding is that application will probably come in the first half of this year.
Okay, I apologize. You probably already mentioned that, but I was out of the
Nope, I
room.
didn't mention that one
All
because it's kind of like on the horizon, but hasn't entered in any formal way yet.
Okay,
So one
Just to let the board know, I'm involved in the project in Magnolia, the one at 171 Magnolia. And I'm also in the Coles one. I'm somewhat involved in that as well, more as a consultant with the development party there. But I'm deeply involved with the one in Magnolia. Just want to let people know that, that's all.
one last question for me. I saw that some of the tools are now available regarding the MBTA community zoning. Is there any update you can provide on like city timeline for looking at those, presenting on those, making determinations on how it impacts the city?
Yeah, I mean, what they've provided is how any proposal will have to be evaluated. And, it's the nuances of some of the things that were not well understood at the time of just the draft legislation, or the draft guidelines are, basically what the denominator was going to be in any potential district that's created. There are areas that will be excluded. There are areas that are counted. So they've formalized that and provided communities with data layers and information on how to assist in evaluating what they propose. Again, I think the timeline is, the first milestone is the submission of an action plan prior to the 31st. And the intention is to front load the discussion around housing and what that might mean and look like for Gloucester in the comprehensive planning process in the beginning of next year. So it isn't, I hate to say it's a big stay tuned, but there's a lot to initiate that process in and of itself. A lot of background data. I think, one of the things that's been talked about this evening, really having people understand what the real estate landscape looks like in Gloucester and what it means for the income levels in Gloucester is really important. And that's part of what will happen in that first phase of the comprehensive.
Great. Okay, I'm just gonna keep on asking every time because
And you
I want to
can
make sure it
continue to
doesn't
do
slip
so.
off the
Yeah.
table.
No. Yep.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
Move to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Right.
Enjoy the holiday, everyone.
Yeah,
We
you too.
look
Yes, you
forward to
too.
seeing
Enjoy
the
the
plan on
holidays.
the 6th.
Mhm. All right, great.
Great.
Greg,
Bye-bye,
thank you
everybody.
for
Okay.
everything.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank
Yep, you too.
You too.